Good evening, everybody. Good evening, good evening. All right, y'all. Good evening from the great state of East Tennessee. My name is Ashley Woodard Henderson. Most of you know me as Ash. I use she, her pronouns or anything said respectfully. And I am the first Black woman executive director of the Highlander Research and Education Center. And I'm proud to be one of the organizations that's making this call possible tonight. Before we get into tonight's agenda to talk about the state of emergency that has always existed, but is particularly heightened in this moment, I want to toss it to our Spanish to English and English to Spanish interpreters to just talk to us a little bit about language justice and the multilingual capacity that we have for tonight's call.
Hi, hello everyone. ¿Me escuchan? ¿Me ven?
Sí.
Sí. Okay, sorry, having some. Ya. Pues gracias por darnos la palabra por un momento. Thank you for giving us some space to speak for a minute. Soy Jazmín, voy a estar interpretando inglés-español, español-inglés con mi colega Andrea, que no la ven porque ahorita está interpretando. My name is Jazmín. I'm going to be doing English-Spanish, Spanish-English interpretation with my colleague Andrea, who is currently interpreting right now. The first thing we want to do is just make sure that everyone knows how to use this function, which you can access if you are on Zoom via your computer or via the app on your phone, not a phone call, the app on your phone. Lo primero que queremos hacer es asegurarnos que todo el mundo sepa cómo usar la interpretación usando Zoom. Y eso es algo que se puede hacer si está conectada por, con su computadora o con la aplicación en su teléfono. No una llamada de teléfono, sino la aplicación de su teléfono. Okay, so if you are on your computer, si está usando su computadora, y baje al pie de la pantalla van a ver unos iconos y deberían de haber uno que dice interpretación, que es un globito. So if you look at the foot of your screen, you should see a bar with some icons, and there'll be one that says interpretation. It's shaped like a globe. If you click it, you can then choose, and don't do it yet, you can choose the channel that you would like to listen to, English or Spanish. Entonces, en ese icono que dice interpretación, si hace clic en ese, va a ver las opciones ahí de inglés o español. No lo elige todavía, pero así es como se va a hacer. If you're on your phone, you should see somewhere 3 dots maybe that say more, that will expand your menu. It's the same idea. You're going to look through the menu to see something that says interpretation, and that's where you choose your language. En el teléfono es algo similar. Quizás tiene que buscar un botón que tenga 3 puntitos para ver un menú más amplio, y ahí puede escoger el idioma que quiera. So I think we're going to go ahead and try that. So my colleague Andrea is going to be interpreting into Spanish. So if everyone can please choose, I want to see if it works, and if it doesn't, maybe you can put something in the chat. Entonces, ahorita vamos a empezar entonces con la interpretación, o vamos a continuar con la interpretación. Mi colega Andrea va a estar interpretando en el canal de español. Entonces, probemos ahora. Y después, si de repente no funciona, lo pueden, quizás nos pueden poner un mensaje en el chat para ver cómo vamos. How's that going? I'm just going to check right quick. Ahorita voy a ver cómo está. I see people who are introducing themselves. I see that the English room is working. Thank you, Roberto.
English room is working.
Okay. If anyone has eyes on the Spanish, that'd be great. Spanish is working. Fantastic. So usually I would be doing all of this in Spanish, but there's a lot going on right now with this technology. So thank everyone for bearing with me here and with each other. I just want to go ahead and repeat something that was said at the very beginning that folks may not have heard. Two things. One, this is being recorded. So I just want to repeat that in Spanish in case it wasn't clear before. So if you don't want to be recorded, you can go ahead and turn off your camera. And then the other thing is that folks are putting their name, pronoun, and location into the chat. So you can do that if you would like. All of that said, I just want to take a moment for everyone to get settled so that we can really communicate. Already it's difficult with the layer of technology that's there, but we also want to make sure that we can be inclusive in terms of languages. And that's something that takes everyone's collaboration. It's a collective effort. It's not just us as interpreters. So we just wanted to name that. And also we have English interpreting, English-Spanish interpreting tonight. We also have ASL interpretation going on. And I'm just really glad to be able to help with that process so that everyone can try to communicate at least in the language in which they're most comfortable, at least the language in which they're most comfortable that we have available tonight. We know that there's many languages here represented that might not have corresponding interpreters or might not even necessarily need them, but are still here present, and we want to honor and recognize that. In fact, if you want to shout them out, you can go ahead and put them in the chat. So in order to do that, one of the things that we can do as a collective is to be mindful of that fact that there is interpretation happening and to not speak too quickly. In fact, I may have been doing that. Apologies to my colleague. While you're speaking, especially if you are reading, keep in mind that when you read, you tend to speak more quickly than you might even realize. So please just don't go too quickly, because then people will miss the information that you are trying to convey. So it's also in your best interest to not go too quickly. If you are, we're going to try to do our hand signals, which will be this kind of stretching bubblegum hand signal, which is please slow down. We'll also use the chat if we need to. It's a little bit trickier. Thank you, Ashley, for modeling that. I'm holding the phone, so it's hard. It's all a little bit trickier with the technology, but I'm just, again, grateful for everyone's patience and collaboration. If there is any issues, though, please be patient. Zoom is buggy. There are glitches. So it's just part of this whole accepting that we're doing what we can thing. And so we're going to try to work them out. Is there anything that I have forgotten to say, colleagues? What did you say, Andrea, with your hands? Oh, speak up. This is please speak up. If we can't hear you, we cannot interpret for you, or for everyone. And I'm not sure if this would be an issue with the format that we have here tonight, but also please, one at a time. We want to make sure that we have one person speaking at a time. We can't interpret more than one voice at a time. We don't want to be in a position to choose which voice gets to be heard and which doesn't. So please, one at a time. Thank you so much. And with that, I will pass it back to Ashley.
For those of you that have your video cameras on, can we give it up one time to the amazing interpretation squad that we got tonight? Shout out to our Spanish to English and English to Spanish interpreters. And also for any of our comrades and colleagues that need ASL, I want to give it up one time to Cynthia. If you need ASL, just look for Cynthia's name. It's Cynthia-interpreter, and you can see her doing it right now. She's amazing. So give it up to our interpretation team one more time before we get into tonight's conversation. So, again, I want to, on behalf of the Highlander Center, just thank you all for making time in such a busy time and such a chaotic time to join this call. We felt very strongly that there's been a need for leadership to say, like, enough is enough, and that our people have been in crises, that COVID is just an addition to all the intersecting crises that many of our communities have been facing. And what we saw was that when we said like, hey, y'all, like get active, do something about what's happening to our people, a lot of people inside the region and outside the region were like, we don't know how, we don't know what to do. So what I wanted to do was pull together some of the brightest, most brilliant people that I know that could not only give us analysis about what's happening, but that could also give us some direct calls to action or tools for support that is needed to be able to move from thinking about what the better world should be and get to the doing of building that better world and practicing that better world together. So I want to thank you for joining us in this experiment, quite frankly, to learn together. And then to not only, I think that what makes Highlander special is that we don't just bring each other together in these spaces to be smarter people, but to actually take that new knowledge that could only exist if we were in the room together and to do something in our communities with it that changes the material conditions of the most marginalized in this country. So if you're in the right spot, can you just give me a thumbs up? All right. All right. I see y'all. I see y'all. I see you. All right. For all of our comrades that are calling in on Facebook, we got almost 100 people down over there in the other side of the internet. Y'all also can be getting down with us on Facebook. You can see that my colleague and comrade Kayla Rowley dropped the link to the Facebook Live. So if you've got any friends that maybe don't understand Zoom, don't do Zoom, but do Facebook, let them know they can watch us over there on the Highlander Facebook page. Now, just to be clear, one more technical thing for this call is that it is jam-packed with really amazing speakers. So if you have questions along the way, make sure you drop them in the chat, and if we can squeeze them in, we will. If not, we'll be following up with contact information for all of our speakers so that you can reach them directly. The last thing that I'll say is that for the sake of getting through this call, we're going to ask that if you are not a presenter, to stay on mute. You can turn your camera on, you can react, you can give us thumbs ups, you can keep the conversation going in the chat, but we're going to ask that you, for the sake of interpretation and for the sake of us being able to get through this amazing content, to stay on mute so that we can hear the folks that will be speaking. So, you know, again, the last thing that I want to say just in terms of the purpose of this call is that we know that we are the experts of like not only the problems that we are facing, the crises that exist, but we're also the experts as marginalized people that are on this call of like what the solutions ought to be. Many of us have been demanding, you know, justice for our people, decarceration, voter justice, electoral justice, immigrant justice, and the like for a very long time. This isn't new fights for us. And that in this moment, we're organizing across the South, across this region, where 1 in 3 Americans lives, right? Where the majority of Black people in this country live. And that we've been fighting and winning for a very long time. But we also know that these intersecting crises are exhausting, they're depressing, they're overwhelming and enraging. So if you came to this call because you're frustrated, can you just wave at me? If you came to this call because you feel overwhelmed and upset and sad and are grieving, can you wave at me? If you got on this call because you're like, listen, I'm doing the best I can with the little I got and I want to know how I can stretch and do more, can you just wave at me? Yeah, you are not alone. Many of us are feeling that way. We put this call out without sharing what the date and time was, and 200 people registered in 2 hours, y'all. Over 600 people, nearly 700 people have registered for this call tonight. So know that you are not alone, not only in your good wishes for our region and for our people, but also in the desire to figure out how we do this work together. My comrade, Ada Smith, said that she doesn't want to be alone in this work and she doesn't have to be. And that's definitely true for all of us that got on this call. So if you're looking to figure out how to win, if you're on this call because you want 2020 to be the year that we do everything that we can, that we leave it all on the table, then you are in the right spot. With that, I want to toss it to start to get into the conversation a little bit. Are y'all ready to hear from some of our speakers? Dope. I'm excited. So I now have the pleasure to do one more thing before I toss it to one of my favorite heartbeats. Is we're gonna do a little poll. So again, I asked you how you're feeling. I want you to really tell me. And if there's something that's not in this list of feelings, I want you to drop how you're feeling in the chat. So how are you holding up in this moment? Are you raging like me? Are you so sad? Are you grieving? Are you not sure how to be active in ways that actually make a difference? Are you just working, keeping busy, but kind of just doing it because that's what we're supposed to do right now? Are you hopeful? Are you engaged? Are you like, girl, I don't even know. It's a whole lot and I'm just trying to figure it out, right? And if none of that fits, just hit me in the chat. I see you, Whitney. It feels different every day. I totally get that. For the comrades on Facebook, feel free to drop how you're feeling as well. Busy, but not making progress. I feel anxious. Yeah, I feel that. I feel that. It's different every minute, every second, every day since this quarantine has been real. Totally. We're going to give it like one more second for folks to fill out the survey. How are you holding up? All the feels at different times. I see that, Kim. Switching and switching between piling beans and organizing. Michael feels mad as hell. I'm pissed off too. Word. Empathy for all the suffering people in the world. And that's a lot of us. Yeah. Yeah. Well, just to show you you're not alone, you can see that many of us are feeling all over the place. Lots of us are angry. Lots of us are sad. Lots of us are grieving. Lots of us are working and busy, but not necessarily feeling productive all the time. Some of us are still hopeful, though, that the new world is coming, that the new America still is to be reborn, and that we could be the midwives, as Vincent Harding would say. Engaged. People are like, I'm figuring it out. It's different all the time, right? So tonight, we're going to have an opportunity to figure out what to do with some of those feelings. And the first person that's going to help us do that is one of my dearest friends, oldest comrades and colleagues, Vahisha Hassan from Movement and Faith and Track for Movement, to talk a little bit about like the crisis of health, right? We know that all of the conversations that we're going to have tonight are like the crisis and then what you can do about it, right? The crisis, name the crisis, and then talk about what we can do about it. So Vahisha is going to talk about the crisis of health. And when we talk about health, she's going to talk about mental health, spiritual health, emotional health, all of it, physical health, and what we can do about it. So with that, I'm going to toss it to you, V.
Greetings, family. It is so good to see all of y'all's faces. I'm very much an empath, so I'm feeling a lot of that pull in my body, but hope was on there, right? And rage was on there. And those are all beautiful and useful emotions. So yeah, Vahisha Hassan, pronouns are she, her, hers, and so much is happening. And so what I want to talk about first, just in terms of a framing, is this part of the state of the emergency that I hold, right? And it's this crisis piece. So I did a lot of my academic work and a lot of my in the world and movement work in crisis places. So I'm not the clinician that's gonna be like, I want to journey with you through 6 months of, what's happening in the office. All very valid. But crisis has like a natural rise and a fall. And so that's the work that I typically do in the world. But what do we do, y'all, today when we have what is sustained crisis, right? So crisis has like a natural rising action, a natural falling action. There's a precipitating event that is the crisis, but we are in a place where we have risen in the crisis and then to some extent leveled off, right? That's sustained crisis, and we're holding that in our bodies. Then, and that's the sustained crisis of just COVID-19, right? In the context of this crisis. But then for Black and Brown folks in our context, both in the South and then in the global South, and then globally in the world, oppression and white supremacy and all of the forces that seek to both devalue and take our lives is our constant state of crisis too. So we hold sustained crisis of surviving, of not being murdered, of not being oppressed, of walking in whatever is our joy and our victory every day. And now we got to hold the sustained crisis of a global pandemic that is disproportionately impacting Black and Brown bodies the same way that oppression and everything else does. So what do we do with that? And then state violence, which is not new, just, comes along and continues to steal our lives and to say that our lives don't matter in their actions and in their violence and in their fatal treatment of our beautiful selves. So now we have compounded crisis. So we have sustained crisis we were already in pre-COVID-19. Now we have the sustained crisis of COVID-19. Then we have all of the other problems that were there before on top of the current crisis that we are in. So this is compounded crisis. And we're feeling this all in our bodies. And it's going to come out somewhere and somehow. And so what do we do with that? How do we process that? How do we make it through that? How do we continue to resist in that? How do we continue to find joy in that? How do we continue to sing and to love and to laugh and to not die, live and not die? So those are all the things that are happening in every way that Ashley kind of lined out, meaning both in our spiritual health, whatever that is, however you find the creator, however you find your strength in faith, and that is our physical health, and that is what does it look like to shelter at home? What does it look like to if you can't, right? What does it look like if you don't have shelter? And then our mental health and our wellness. So these are all aspects of our personhood that we still need to address on top of sustained and compounded crisis. Why is this work that we should have to do? That's more work. So it's hard. It's deeply hard. It's deeply, deeply hard. So, but the same way that all of these problems are available, healing is also available. And that same healing is available in these bodies. So that as much as we have cortisol, that is like that, you know, that's our stress hormone and adrenaline and all these things that come out, we still have like serotonin, and we still have faith, and we still have community, and we still have each other, and we still have our ancestors, and we still have all of the things that we have learned and unlearned. So what a couple of things that I want to do, I'm going to give you the resource that I am personally a part of in a couple of ways, but what I want to do in the chat is I want you to, if you are involved in any way, if you are a healer or you have offerings of healing that are inclusive and are seeking to benefit Black and brown bodies, poor bodies, marginalized bodies, you know, bodies that are attempting to be oppressed, I would love for you to drop that in the chat, because what I don't want to pretend, right, is that this initiative that I'm a part of is the only thing popping, is the only thing available, because it's not, right? And I want that to be clear. So if you offer healing in any way, drop those options in the chat. We will catalog them and make sure that they are made available to folks, or y'all can mine that for yourself in the chat. And then the one that I want to tell you about, so I'm a reverend. I come from a Christian tradition, originally a Baha'i tradition growing up with a little of the nation on the side. And what I'm a core team of what is called Track for Movements. This is TRACC for Movements. And this is a trauma response and crisis care. So even before this came together, this is the work that I did in the world. So I would come on the scene in different areas of protest and resistance and offer opportunities and ways for healing to happen as resistance has happened, because the healing is part of our resistance, right? They're not gonna kill no parts of us. You hear that? But let's all agree on that. They're not gonna kill any of us, any of our parts, right? So healing is a part of that. So with the Track for Movements, this is a collection of people who are already healers, and I'm talking run the gamut. And so this is not necessarily faith-based. They do have faith options, but it's much broader context than that. So you have healers that are like do somatics, you have Reiki, you have doctors, you have, it's amazing. So Ashley is gonna drop the website for that. And it's just trackformovements.com, but there's some backslash to it if you particularly want to get what is our COVID-19 care option. And what this looks like is you get 3 sessions. You go in, you click on, you sign up, and you're able to get 3 sessions, 3 supportive sessions for free. Here free, because this is an offering. This is a community offering for free for someone to hold this space with you. So whatever your context is, whatever it is, then you can bring that to this space and you can be like held and nurtured and given particularly some tools of healing that may be available to you, right? And then post that, after if you would like support beyond the 3 sessions, then we have opportunities available for that. But we at least want to offer this. I think of folks both like, you know, whatever is frontline at this point, because the goalpost keeps moving, but the frontline folks, the first responder folks, and what that looks like. This is for people who have lost their jobs or no longer have income, then this is an offering that you can still get this wellness care. You can still resist in this way and focus on your healing and your wellness, because we need each other to be well and to be whole. And so this is an opportunity for that. And there are one-on-one virtual ways to connect, but there are also support group offerings. There are in particular like wellness tools options, and the website gives you a full display. It's very transparent, right? So it gives you a full display of all of the practitioners and the healers that are available to you. And we are here for who you are and how you show up in the world. And you don't have to explain to us what oppression is while you're trying to get healed, right? So we come with some analysis, and that can be a hard space for wellness when you got to explain, you know, why your identity is a problem first, why you resist in the way that you do. So I'm gonna close this out just so you at least know, because this is just an introduction, right? But know that healing is available for you. Know that it is okay that you feel whatever you feel, because you are in a sustained and compounded crisis. And so your feelings are valid, your response is valid, and wellness is available to you. Thank you so much, y'all.
Vahisha said, healing is resistance. Healing is resistance. If you agree with that, can you just wave at me? Yeah, healing is resistance. So thanks so much in this moment where people are getting away with killing Black people with impunity, where the federal and sometimes our local elected officials are doing everything in their power to pass regressive policies to take back the victories that we've made for our people and to pass even worse policy to harm our people. It makes sense that there's a whole lot of healing that needs to be done, right? But there is nothing wrong with the righteous rage and the grief that many of us are feeling right now. And we wanted to make sure that we had folks like Track for Movements on the line to be able to speak directly about ways that we can be supported as we figure out how to navigate those feelings and be even more effective in our movement work. So thank you again to Vahisha for that.
I forgot to say one thing, Ashley, my apologies. I will be available in the chat. So if you feel like you need some space held right now, I'm here for you. And I can let you know other folks who are on here that are able to hold space for you, even in this moment right now, because we're also going to dig into some hard places, right? So we're here and available.
Yeah, we're literally about to start digging into some of those hard places. So again, if you need support while we're on this call, Vahisha just gave you permission to consensually slide into her private messages, and you can just go into the chat function, and where it says everyone, just click and type in Vahisha's name and it'll bring her right up. You can holler at her directly. If you can't figure that out, it's cool. Just say, Vahisha, I need you in the chat, and she can find you. Awesome. Thank you so much to Vahisha and to the Track for Movements fam for taking care of us. Next, we're going to move. And y'all, these transitions are going to be swift because we've got a lot of content that we want to get to y'all in a relatively short amount of time. So we're moving next to, again, a colleague and a comrade who has literally put his life on the line to keep me safe, to keep so many of us safe, and to support the leadership of grassroots folks that are really doing mutual aid as a political act that's rooted in the history, the values, the principles of mutual aid. I'm going to toss it to one of my dearest colleagues and comrades, Bo Braxton, to talk about the crisis of need, the crisis of criminalization, and of homelessness, and to talk about mutual aid as a solution. So Bo, I'm going to toss it to you.
Thanks, Ash. So yeah, hey y'all, I'm Bo Braxton. I use he, they pronouns, and I'm the coordinator for the community safety team at Highlander, the director and founding member of East Tennessee Harm Reduction, and I'm also a member of First Aid Collective Knoxville. I've been practicing harm reduction, community defense, and mutual aid in Appalachia and the South for over a decade. Currently, I'm in Knoxville doing frontline rapid response work as a medic and community caregiver. I deliver food, water, shelter, and other supplies daily to some of Knoxville's most marginalized communities, in addition to the usual barriers they face when trying to access care or even just survive. Our community is combating a recent 400+% spike in drug-related overdoses. To date, I've personally given out over 1,000 naloxone kits, which is an overdose rescue remedy, and have set up a rapid response hotline for folks in need of harm reduction supplies or medical help without fear of state oppression. In just the last few weeks, we've had over 40 confirmed saves with the naloxone kits. East Tennessee Harm Reduction is calling on the Knoxville Mayor, Ken Cannon, to decriminalize all drug use during the pandemic. And I'm also actively working with community members who use drugs to train them on how to administer naloxone so they can maintain their autonomy in saving each other's lives, because drug users are the heroic first responders. What?
You got it. We just had a comrade went off mute. Keep going.
Let's see. Other harm reduction measures I'm taking include online naloxone trainings for folks, and that's for anyone across the nation. I've even done a couple internationally at this point. Working directly with dealers to test their supply for fentanyl so they can let folks know to go slow and do a test shot. We're creating strong batch alerts and sharing them with communities on the ground, as well as with other regional harm reduction groups, to track the movement of the supply around Appalachia so we can let folks know when there's been something cut too strong or too heavy and what they can do to protect themselves and to use safely. Last Thursday, I stood in solidarity with families at a camp I regularly medic for and deliver supplies to. And after a few stressful hours, we were able to shut down a pre-planned police raid and demolition of the encampment. Shout out to our local councilwoman, Amelia Parker, for showing up. We couldn't have stopped them without her. I cannot stress enough the importance and fruitfulness of talking to folks and building on and nurturing the potential relationships that already exist in your own communities. Concrete next steps for any work you want to do must include meeting people where they're at. Go out with some food and just ask folks what they need. Bring a pen and paper and let folks write for themselves. The folks in the camp asked for backup for the raid, so I followed their leadership and made signs with the folks at the camp. And with permission to bring additional folks into their home, I brought a couple pals along the day the raid was planned for. Everyone has the power within themselves to be an anti-racist organizer. I had no agenda when I was first started showing up in these camps. Trying to stage any sort of action. But when you actively listen to people and build trust with folks, actions can happen organically. What started out as me bringing food for folks and supplies every day for the last month and a half turned into a community proving their resiliency by fighting our mayor and police department's continued violent and racist criminalization of houselessness during the pandemic. The racist criminalization of houselessness in Knoxville is a crisis, and the violent and racist Knoxville Police Department continuing to throw people in jail for drug use during a pandemic is a crisis. Now more than ever is the time to be an accomplice and not an ally. I urge you and implore you to find like-minded folks in your community to see what kind of plan you can come up with. How can you take care of the folks that the state wants to see perish? What are your skills? Share your ideas with others and don't be afraid to work alone. Listen to what folks say and then work together to build a future that holds all of us. So you really can just go out there, like if you're able to, or just talk to your neighbors and see what they need. And it really does just take like one small step. Everyone's able to help like in some small way, whether it's like sharing your friends' info on the internet and like using social media as a platform, or getting more involved on the ground. But everyone can find their niche and find something they're good at in a way that can really change things. And to support the work I and others are doing in Knoxville, we're asking for fiscal support. You can donate to East Tennessee Harm Reduction. We have a Venmo at East TN Harm Redux, REDUX, and same on Cash App. You can follow us on Instagram to see action photos from the other day, as well as information on how to use safely. You can share with your friends and family. And that's East TN Harm Redux also on Instagram. Thanks so much. And I look forward to answering any questions.
Thanks, Bo. And I saw Sean Fisher, one of the greatest that's ever done mutual aid, down in the chat. Be on the lookout for more mutual aid calls from Highlander that are being supported by folks like Bo and Sean. Shout out to all of you that are doing mutual aid work. Shout out to all of you that are supporting the folks that the state is making a decision are worth being left behind and left out. And we heard some really concrete things that we could do, right? You could contact your mayor and you could tell your mayor to decriminalize drug usage during this moment. You could get trained on how to make sure that our people aren't out here overdosing. There's so many other resources available to you. So if you have more questions, again, feel free to reach out directly to Bo. We'll make sure that you all have Bo's contact information. So with that, we want to give it up one time for Bo Braxton. Thank you so much for being on this call. Next, again, I have the opportunity to bring to you one of the most brilliant minds I know that's been fighting for Black lives for as long as I've known her and known of her work. I've been fangirling about this person for like the last decade. I get to toss it to Tiffany Williams Roberts, who is going to talk a little bit about the crisis of Black genocide and the fight for justice for Ahmaud. So Tiffany, I'll toss it to you.
Thank you so much, Ash. I am so grateful to be here with you all this evening. It's a sacred space and it's so needed. I am going to work to pace myself and not talk too fast. I'm also very country, so if I say something and you need me to repeat it, please just let me know. I am my title at Southern Center for Human Rights, which is a nonprofit law firm, is Community Engagement and Movement Building Council. And what I do at Southern Center is I work to build relationships between grassroots community members or grassroots organizations, community members, grass tops, and even sometimes government stakeholders to move some changes that are already happening on the ground. My position is only 2 years old, and it came about because, as many of you know, there's a gap between many organizations that say that they serve the people and sort of the tools that are needed in order to actually deliver the help that folks need in the way that people are asking for it. And so my organizing history is about 11 years around police accountability and criminal legal reform. And I was also a public defender before going into criminal defense and civil rights law. And so essentially this job just gives me the opportunity to work with my friends to do what I was already doing as a volunteer, as a part of the policy unit at Southern Center. As many of you know, Ahmaud Arbery was killed on February the 23rd of this year by two vigilantes in Brunswick, Georgia. And Brunswick is a small town in Glenn County, Georgia. that's very close to the coast. And so if you're familiar with St. Simon Island and some other parts of the Georgia coast that were populated by formerly enslaved Africans, we know that South Georgia is home to a rich Black revolutionary history. And Brunswick is a very Black town, sort of in a wealthier white county. And so these two men stalked Ahmaud Arbery and killed him while he was jogging in Brunswick. And a defense lawyer leaked the video of the killing. And that sort of sparked some national outrage around what was already an existing local movement started by the family of Mr. Arbery, the local NAACP chapter, faith leaders, and a local Omega Psi Phi chapter in Brunswick. And so since February, community has been fighting. And what has happened is now that there's national attention, many of us in Georgia realize that sort of the quiet and gentle support that we've been offering or giving to our friends in Southeast Georgia needed to be amplified a bit in order to protect their movement, right? To protect what they are already doing and to ensure that we don't come down there and say that we're saving people, right? That without the people who were in Southeast Georgia, you would never have had any of the DAs to recuse themselves. So we are now on our fourth prosecutor in this case. The first prosecutor handed the case, whose name is Jackie Johnson, handed the case over to her friend in a neighboring county, George Barnhill. Jackie Johnson handed the case over because one of the killers had worked in her office, or currently worked in her office as an investigator. And then she handed over to George Barnhill, who is in a neighboring county, and he decided that there was no probable cause. But the mother of Ahmaud Arbery forced his recusal, forced him to step down by making noise. And he was so upset that he had to recuse himself and hand the case over to the AG to be reassigned, that he said that he only did so because of rabble rousers. He's referring to the mother of the man who was killed by vigilantes in his backwoods, in his backyard. So after that, it was assigned to another district attorney, and today it's been assigned to a fourth district attorney. And so I highlight that just to bring to the surface that we all know as Southerners and as people doing work in the South, that there is this sense, and I don't know where it comes from, that people in the South need folk from outside to come down and tell them what to do, as though some of our most revolutionary leaders have not been Southerners, right? As though the people that we quote day in and day out are not born and bred in the South and often in the rural South. So we came together last week to form a coalition of folks to circle around the people already organizing in Georgia, and we called ourselves Just Georgia. So of course, a play on words like you're just people from Georgia, and that we're seeking to establish a just Georgia that can be worthy of the work that our ancestors did. And so I can share some of the organizational demands that we have and some of the organizations that we're working with. I'm gonna see. Is it possible to share a screen, or should I just talk? Just talk.
We'll get it so you can share. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
All right, now you got it.
Your wife done her.
So we met over the weekend, and organizers, you all know how that goes, right? So we have been meeting. We had a couple of meetings, and we had a call yesterday of about 80 folks to share out what some of the demands are. And on our call today, somebody said, I'm inspired because we're showing that Georgia's got Georgia. So that's the GA got GA on the front. So some of the organizations who are working with us are, of course, the Georgia NAACP, Southern Center for Human Rights, Malcolm X Grassroots Movement, I see Georgia NAACP there twice. Southern Center for Human, oh, wow. See, you can tell this is a work in progress. ACLU Georgia, Black Male Voters Project, Black Voters Matter Action Fund, Working Families Party, New Georgia Project Action Fund, Fair Fight Action, Color of Change, Let Us Make Man, and Beacon Hill Alliance for Black Lives. So this is what we have as our call. And again, this is just from our draft guiding document. We are a collective of Georgia organizations, activists, faith leaders, attorneys, and justice-seeking community members. We believe that the killing of Ahmaud Arbery was the result of decades of systemic harm against Black Georgians. We hold two truths: that many in our communities want to see the killers of Ahmaud Arbery accountable for the trauma they have inflicted on the entire community, and that our contributions must better equip Georgians to respond to the multiple systemic ills inflicting violence on our communities in a daily basis. And what we're striving to hold is that we are working not because we believe that any results or any verdict in a criminal case is going to bring justice to people in Georgia. That we know that this killing is a part. We've had so many killings in Georgia. It's actually hard to keep up. And so we know that the spotlight that's on this case is helpful because only because it can help us advocate for a much broader change. And so this is what we have as our lens. And I won't read it verbatim because I think I've said a lot of it. But essentially, we're just saying that we know that we can hold the hands of people outside of our communities, outside of Georgia, while still maintaining a certain respect for the indigenous culture that we've established over time. And that we can be transparent and we can be collaborative, but that we hope that we can also turn away anyone who would use this publicity for monetary gain, to elevate their platforms, to bolster their personalities. These are the things that we know happen when we can't protect our own. So that's our lens. And our demands are on the following slides, but essentially, many of our demands right now relate to the killing specifically. But longer term, we hope to attack the issues that caused this killing, right? That caused this death. And we know that from even before our children are born until they take their last breaths, there are so many systemic issues that we need to tackle to make that harm less likely. And so the first demand is around these district attorneys who behaved improperly. Both Jackie Johnson and George Barnhill broke many rules of professional conduct. And so this is just, we have a couple of friends who specialize in bar discipline in Georgia. And so these are just a couple of the rules of professional conduct that we believe these district attorneys violated. And some of these rules can result of, the violation of these rules can cause them to be disbarred. So one of our internal strategies or inward facing sort of strategies is to facilitate the filing of comprehensive grievances with the State Bar of Georgia to put these district attorneys' licenses at issue or in jeopardy. So that's one of our demands, is that they resign, but because we know they probably won't resign, also to cause their jobs to be in jeopardy. The second demand is around the independent investigations. In some states, as many of you know, independent investigation is automatically triggered whenever there is a killing, a state killing. In Georgia, that's not the case. The Georgia Bureau of Investigations can come in if invited, right? Or will come in if invited. And so right now, the GBI is investigating this killing, but that was announced over the last week, has met with the family, has met with the attorneys for the family. But there aren't many rules in Georgia around what these agencies are required to release and when they have to release information. So here we're just advocating for the release of information to the family and ultimately the community within a specified period of time. And we'll continue to work on this demand by reviewing best practices from other states. And then the number 5 here is just to say that in Georgia, what happens is when the GBI begins to investigate, the home agency, the police department that employs the officer often ceases or they halt their investigation. And the justification that they use is that the GBI is investigating. There's nothing that says that these agencies can't continue to investigate whether their officers violated their standard operating procedures. Because if they do and they adjudicate those officers, they can be terminated. And so we would like for the culture to change in Georgia, either requiring independent investigations to continue to move forward, or for them to be encouraged to move forward instead of blaming the GBI for their failure to respond to community. Over the last 8 years before Governor Brian Kemp took office, we had 8 years of comprehensive criminal legal reform in Georgia that by standards in the South were progressive in many ways, and probably by national trends weren't as progressive.
Hey, Tiffany, do me a favor and slow down just a little bit for the interpreters, please.
Oh, I can't see because of my screen. I'm so sorry. Okay. So we had 8 years of reform, and now what we're facing is the repeal of many of those reforms. The governor's signature legislation is gang legislation. So we're looking at this policy agenda saying what could have stopped the killing, right? And the criminalization of Black people in Georgia is often reinforced by legislation like gang legislation. So one thing that we'd like to do is to fight House Bill 994, which is the governor's gang bill. We also have a citizens arrest statute in Georgia that allows ordinary people to arrest folks for felonies they claim were committed in their presence or in their immediate knowledge, and we're calling for the repeal of that. Third, treat kids like kids. Georgia is in the minority of states that still charge children aged 17 automatically as adults. And so we're asking that, legislation has popped up in Georgia numerous times to raise the age. And so raise the age legislation is part of this. And the other piece of this is whittling down the list or getting rid of the list that allows children to be charged as adults, period. And then the fourth is the end of wealth-based detention, which I know many of you are working on or have worked on. Right now, there is a bill pending before our legislature that would completely outlaw signature bonds. So take away one of the two tools we have in our toolboxes in Georgia for people to be released from jail without purchasing their freedom. The next agenda item we have is just to increase voter turnout, because all of our DA races are contested this year. And this is the DA race down in Glenn County is also a contested race. And so we're hopeful that if voters continue to be better educated about issues around prosecutors, they can make more informed decisions in races where they're not typically engaged. And so that, and then the final piece is to invest in local movement and infrastructure. One of the asks that we've put out to our friends on the national level or even the regional level is to donate or to lend resources so that we can have staff working down in Brunswick with some of the organizations on the ground. As I mentioned, we have the NAACP Georgia, NAACP Brunswick, and then we have some churches and then the Omegas in Brunswick. And what they've said is they really need organizing, training, and reinforcement. And so we already are deploying some resources down there and will continue to do so. But if any of you are willing or interested in finding out how to plug into that network of people looking to send resources down to, so that when the cameras are gone, we still have people there who are supported and who have what they need to continue to move the ball forward in Southeast Georgia. And by tonight, this website should be live. It's just-georgia.org. And then our Twitter handle is ajustgeorgia, and our Facebook page is ajustgeorgia. I believe, and Hillary's on the call, I know she's talking later. I believe we'll have the fundraising link up, and the plan is for the money to go to NAACP Georgia and to then be distributed both to the family and for these organizing efforts. And 100% of any money that is given will go directly to the family or to the community in Brunswick being built up. This isn't going to any PACs or anything like that. So we are, once the website is up, we hope to post regular updates, and I'll stop my share. We hope to post regular updates, and we really are grateful for the support that the world has given to this community, because like I said, it's a community where you go and you feel like you're at home, right? And it is very discouraging when we see when they are not getting the support that they deserve. So thank you all for being interested in that. And I'll put my email address in the chat so that if you all need information from me directly, I'm happy to share that.
Thank you so much, sis, for making time at the absolute final hour to join us. We're grateful and know that the Highlander Center is at the ready to support. And if you are also standing and supporting our comrades in Southeast Georgia, can you just like wave at Tiffany so she knows she's not out here by herself? We see you, we love you, to the family, right? Like sending love and light, right? That we will not sit silently pretending like everything's okay because it wasn't in our backyard, because it did happen to our neighbor, right? So if you're down to throw down with Just Georgia, can you just wave at me? Hit me in the reactions. Yeah. Love to you, comrade. We appreciate you. Y'all down to hear a little bit more about what you can do? There's still more, and yet there is more, and yet there is more. So now I have the privilege of being able to introduce you to one of Tennessee's greatest, one of the leaders of Law for Black Lives, one of the leaders of the National Bailout Collective, one of the leaders of Tennessee Organizing for Power Statewide, also known as TOPS. I get to introduce you to one of my sisters and comrades in the struggle. I'm going to toss it next to Erica Perry.
Thank you so much, and just so grateful to be able to talk to folks and jam out on some ways that folks can support the work going on in the South and especially Tennessee, and standing in like deep solidarity with y'all in Georgia and ready to go whenever y'all make the call. And so again, my name is Erica Perry. Any pronouns work for me. I'm an organizer and movement lawyer working out in Nashville, Tennessee. And so grateful to be representing Tennessee Organizing for Power Statewide and Law for Black Lives. Yes, statewide. Thank you. And so because we know there are a few other tops in the South, I'll just call us Tennessee tops to distinguish the difference. And I just want to talk a bit, y'all, about kind of what we see happening around mass incarceration and abolition. And what folks are doing to really push forward a world where police and prisons are abolished, where people are living free. And so just want to name, as y'all already know, that this country is obsessed with policing, punishment, and incarceration, and has been using that since its founding to control and contain our communities, and continue to use that as a resource and a tool, even during this pandemic. And so In Tennessee, like many other states, and even the federal government, they're using this moment to further criminalize our communities, to invest more money and resources into policing, and double down on their commitment to incarceration. And so we even see this in the stimulus bill, where they invested hundreds of millions in dollars to state and local law enforcement without even any direction. And then y'all know this to be true when we look at the way the police has responded to this moment. And so as organizations have demanded that the police discontinue arrests to help prevent the spread of COVID-19 in jails and in our communities, the police continue, y'all, to arrest our people, putting families and communities and people who remain in jail in further danger. I was just looking at the jail report in Shelby County, where I saw somebody be arrested for contempt of court, right? So probably for not coming to court. And I'm like, this is what y'all doing with y'all time? Y'all arresting people, putting people in jeopardy for not coming to court, while courts are mostly closed. And so that is deeply irrational and absurd. And then we also look and see in Nashville, a person who was quarantined at the fairgrounds was arrested after attempting to leave. And so is now being charged with attempting to escape a penal institution. And we got questions, one around that's being named as a penal institution, another why they're arresting people for attempting to leave. And so shout out to the homies at Gideon's Army and Free Hearts and No Exceptions and Tennessee Tops for really organizing to create some accountability, transparency, and stop that shit. And then we see in other jurisdictions that police are using this moment as a tool to continue to police and arrest our people, to arrest our people for violating shelter in places, to arrest our people for not quarantining. And then y'all, again, seeing the ways that this country is obsessed with using policing to govern our communities. In Tennessee, under the leadership of our governor, they're allowing local law enforcement to have access to the names and addresses of people who test positive for COVID-19. And again, y'all, we have questions and say that it's simply not okay. And then just want to continue to stay in Tennessee real quick. We see them using the National Guard to test folks in public housing and rural communities. And again, shout out to the homies who are really like demanded that they discontinue that and demanded accountability. And before we get into kind of like what folks are doing, I just want to also name some of the work that some of the things we see happening inside of prisons and jails. And so in Tennessee, we see close to 2,000 people have tested positive in Tennessee prisons alone for COVID-19. We also know that throughout the country, and these numbers, I think they've underreported because the CDC only got reports from, I believe, like 32 jurisdictions, but 5,000 people inside of prisons inside of this country tested positive for COVID-19. And so we also know in talking to families of folks who have family members on the inside, talking to our own people, they reported that they're living in crowded cells. The cells were already crowded. We know our people could not social distance inside of there. We know that prisons and jails were already inhumane and put our people at risk. And then this moment just further increases that. And so we also know that our people, because of getting reports and talking to our people on the inside, do not have the necessary equipment to sanitize their quarters, cannot practice social distancing. Our people are not receiving the medical care that they need, and our people, y'all, are dying inside of these jails. And so I'm just humbled by the work that our people are doing to get our people out of cages to free them all. And so recognizing that this moment is a unique opportunity to make bold and radical demands. And so shout out to Southerners on the Ground, to Tennessee Tops, to Free Hearts, and other organizations. Oh, I'm sorry. Am I going too fast, y'all? Probably. Again, I too am country and talk fast. So slow me down, friends. And so shout out, friends, to Southerners on the Ground, Tennessee Tops, Free Hearts, and other organizations throughout, especially the South, who are making really strong and bold demands. And in many places we're winning. And I mean, throughout the US South, to get our people out of cages, to free all our people, and really clear that we mean all of our people, that our people should be home with their families and their communities to really practice social distancing, to really remain safe during this moment. And also leaning on the the history and the tradition and the demands that we have been making to abolish prisons, to abolish policing, and finding this unique moment is a time to also continue in making those bold demands. And so Tennessee Tops, really led by the leadership of Free Hearts, is organized with folks who are on the inside and family members of people who are in jail and prisons, really targeting the parole board to demand that they grant parole, and targeting the governor to demand that he use his clemency power to release our people from prison. And we see people doing that throughout the country. And in some places, our people are winning. And we're also shouting out movement organizations like the National Bailout Collective, Dream Defenders, Official Black Lives Matter, Memphis, and Women on the Rise, along with other homies like SE Justice and Plan Nevada, who are bailing our folks out of cages, y'all, who are getting mamas and caregivers out of cages, who are getting people out of cages, so that they can be home with their families, so that they can be safe during this moment. And then y'all, not only are we getting our people out of cages, we're also using and seeing where the state refuses to meet our folks' needs, which is in many ways, y'all. We are coordinating and providing supportive services to make sure our folks' needs are met, that they are safe during this moment. And I also want to name that as a movement lawyer, we also see our organizations and lawyers coming together to use the legal system as a tactic to get our people out of jail. So mass petitions and mass clemency. And so just want to make a pitch to folks who, if you're a legal worker, law student, or lawyer, to join Law for Black Lives in our work to collaborate with and support movement organizations who are throwing down to build power, make strong policy demands, and get our people out of prisons and jails. And so I'll put the link in the doc when we wrap up. But I also want to shout out and ask that if you're in Tennessee to sign on to our demands. And I put the link in the chat again. And also, y'all, hit us up if you want to throw down, right? So we are working throughout the state, as Ashley said, statewide, really to build upon a coalition to redefine public safety. So if you feeling that shit, hit us up. And then also, y'all, you can donate to the National Bailout Collective, and that money is going to bail folks out and meet our folks' social services needs. And I put all the links in the chat box. But super grateful to be among y'all, seeing a lot of my homies, my comrades who I struggle and move with, and feeling especially held in this moment.
I mean, give it up one time for Erica Perry, Tennessee's finest. Shout out to the Power Tops. We love y'all. We see y'all that are on the call. Thank you for joining us. I didn't come up with the name, by the way. I just inherited it, but it's brilliant. Appreciate y'all for your brilliance and your work. They're saving lives all across the state. And let it be known that when I say across the state, I mean like 40 different cities and counties across the state of Tennessee. I'm not just talking about Chattanooga, Memphis, Nashville, Knoxville. I'm talking about also those counties that you wouldn't even know, right? So we're working across the urban-rural divide. We're working across the state. It's real low ego, high impact kind of work. And so I'm grateful to be a part of that. And Highlander's grateful to serve. Y'all ready for some more? Because yet there is more. So now, again, I get to give it up to another badass woman of color in the movement. She is one of, anybody heard of United We Dream? Raise your hand if you've heard of it. Them badass freedom fighters that have been fighting for immigrant youth, that are led by immigrant youth. So I have the pleasure of introducing you, one of my dearest friends, one of my closest comrades, like someone who puts her energy and her resources and her commitments into supporting Southern leadership and flanking and supporting particularly folks that are fighting against anti-Black racism as a Latinx person in this work. So I just want to like shout her out as like somebody that I do find to consistently be a co-conspirator and an accomplice and not just an ally. I want to toss it over now to one of United We Dream's finest, Grecia Martinez Rosas, to give us a little bit about the crisis of xenophobia and what people are doing to fight for immigrant justice.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that intro means a lot to me. And it means a lot to be in a space of comrades and people that are experiencing this moment together and going through it together. My name is Greisa Martinez Rosas. I am undocumented, unafraid, queer, and unashamed. And I serve as the Deputy Executive Director of United We Dream. I want to say thank you for spending the evening together. And I'm grateful to represent undocumented immigrant youth and our families who are wholly neglected by this government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. But let's be real, our people have been wholly neglected by these systems for decades, and that has started from the treatment of Black people as slaves, and that is, like, I think the biggest piece that we are seeing. All of these sins of people are coming to bear, and are unfortunately Black and brown people in particular are bearing the consequences of what that means, that our systems have not been put in place to ensure all of our safety and all of our health. I want to say that immigrant workers in particular, which is the folks that I organize with every single day, the majority who are women, we have always been essential. People are talking now about essential workers and about how important people are. Yes, 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 yes. And we have always been essential to the moving forward of this country. It is important to also note that in the face of COVID, they are undocumented people, immigrant workers, and working class people are keeping our country moving. They are keeping our country fed. They are keeping people safe and healthy. They are putting people first. And yet these people who are cooking the food that we're eating don't have enough to eat themselves. Our moms, our dads, the people that we love on this call, we are cooking the food for these people. We don't even have food to eat ourselves. We don't have access to healthcare or to free COVID testing or to treatment that we need necessarily to keep us alive. And we've seen Congress be really clear about whose lives matter when they think about legislation. Super clear. Corporations and people that are not Black, and people that are not immigrants, and people that are not queer. We see that over and over again. We also know that this is disproportionately impacting Black people and Black communities across the country. And I want to be very clear about the fact that we are learning and studying from the pathway led by us, by Black organizers, particularly from the South. And we're learning and humbly coming in to fight for our own lives as brown communities, and knowing that our liberation is tied to Black people, in particular Black women, leading the way. I want to tell you a story of where this becomes real. United We Dream, we're a national network, but we deeply believe in the power of grassroots organizing. And so we've made a deep investment in states like Texas, like Florida, like New Mexico, and places across the South and Southwest, where we believe that that's where the people with the most have the most at stake, have the also closest to the solutions. And so in Miramar, Florida, there is a group of people that are organizing, and it is also the home of some of the largest for-profit detention centers across the South. And we were getting calls from people that were in that detention center right after COVID pandemic, and a little bit before. They were telling us that their cellmates were getting sick and they didn't know what was happening, and they weren't getting the help that they needed, and they were really scared for what was going to happen to their lives. People were risking their own safety by telling their stories to us and to their families. And what that brought to light was a campaign, the Free Them All campaign. And it was in correlation to the work that Dream Defenders and others are driving in Florida. And our demand was super clear. Let our people go. Ensure that these families are able to stay with their families, or that are able to stay alive. And so we, along with the Southern Poverty Law Center and a bunch of other grassroots organizations, we were able to win the release of people from detention centers. And the ICE detention center said, fine, we'll let them go. You brought all this mess, we'll do that. But let me tell you what happened. There, we declared victory. The judge said yes, but immediately these detention centers started shipping people from Miramar, Florida, all the way to Georgia, to Alabama, to Texas. And they started shipping people so that they didn't even have a chance to get out, so that we didn't even have a chance to reunite them with their families. That is what's happening in our country right now. And this is particularly focused around the work that is happening around the South. We know why this is happening, because institutions discriminate against people of color, against immigrants, against workers. This is happening because Donald Trump and Republicans in Congress and Democrats choose corporations over people over and over again. We should all be outraged that essential workers are treated like they are dispensable. And every single relief package that Congress is going to talk about, they must include healthcare for all of us. They must include financial assistance for all of us. People are getting sick. As my sister was saying, people are dying. And our immigration status should not be a condemnation to sickness, hunger, or death. I want to be also very clear that it's not just that the brunt of a lot of this xenophobic rhetoric is also being felt by our Asian American sisters and brothers. The fact that some of them are being punched in the face by just walking down the street. The fact that people are having to make emergency plans for when they go just to get the groceries to be able to survive. That is what we're talking about today. And it's just as we're asking others to take solidarity with us, we are standing in solidarity with our folks from Asian descent all across the country. I want to say that though this is really dark, hope is not lost. And actually, in the many times that I've been blessed to talk to Ashley or share any space with her, she always reminds me that there is no choice but going forward, and that the pathway to move forward starts in the South. And that our ability to ensure that like a vision that we all believe in comes to fruition must and should include the leadership of Black women, particularly in the South. So, sisters and brothers, I want to tell you that young people, the people that I represent at United We Dream, we are ready to throw down with all of you. And we ask that you throw down with us. And I need you, these are 3 things that we can do to walk together. The first thing is to listen to whatever Ashley tells us to do. No, I was kidding. But yes, the first one is to, when people in the government won't take care of us, we take care of ourselves and each other. And so we have launched a national undocumented fund where we are asking people to donate. In the last couple of weeks, we've been able to fundraise close to $200,000 that go directly to undocumented families. It's not much, it's $400 per family, but it gets groceries on the table. The second thing is like any space that you're in, when people are talking about COVID and when people are talking about how we should respond, please ask, what does this mean for undocumented families? What does this mean for people and immigrants in the communities? And the third one is, I want you to follow the stories that's happening right now about meatpacking industries all across the country. We are seeing that meatpackers, in particular Black and Latino and undocumented folks, are being forced to stay in these jobs and being held responsible for their own health. I just read that some of these companies, including Tyson, are blaming workers for their own sickness. And sisters and brothers, I want us to be able to ensure that like moving forward, the pathway to healthcare for all, for going into rent-free places, to ensuring that people have what they need to eat and to survive, that we go through that together. And so the third thing that I ask for you is that follow this story, follow the leadership of folks there. There's a lot of folks that have been asking for the folks that are working in this meatpacking plants to be let go so they can go home and be safe. And also that we should be asking questions about why is this something that is allowed in this country? And meatpackers are just one industry out of many that I know we've all known. So I'll end with just saying that I am a daughter of a Southern Baptist preacher. And in this moment, I have been really digging into my faith and asking questions about, you know, what can I do? What can I say to bring myself hope and my people inspiration? And I often think about the story of Exodus, where people had done the organizing. People were already crossing through the deserts, and they knew that Pharaoh's army was coming behind them, and they were at the water's edge. The sea sort of lay before them, and they knew that there was no way that they could go back. No way, because all that was there for them is death. And they knew they had to move forward. And I want us to imagine that we're in that moment in the water's edge, right before God parted the waters. And sisters and brothers, I believe that we're going to be able to make that pathway forward. So don't be scared. We will part the waters to ensure that all of us together make it to the other side. So I am with you. I am ready to walk those waters with you. And I'm excited to continue to build a movement that really talks and speaks to all of the things that we need. So thank you so much for the invitation, and thank you for the time.
I mean, that's a whole entire word, y'all. How many people know we have to demand let my people go, and we have to make sure that our people move forward? How many people know it's a both and? Right? It ain't just about what the state can do for us. It's also about what we can do for ourselves and making sure that our people come along with us. Am I right? Can we give it up for Grace here one time? Give it up one time. Now listen, I know we've held you for well over an hour, but yet there is still more, right? And the people that I come from said, we who believe in freedom got to get this work in real quick. So y'all ready to get into the next one? Yeah. Now, I want to tell you, we just threw a lot at you real quick. So if you're like, oh my gosh, I'm overwhelmed, totally makes sense. Guess what? We're recording this, right? If you need to go take care of yourself, by all means do. But we still gonna get this work done, okay? So we're gonna keep going. What we're gonna do is encourage you to take a breath, stretch it out real quick. You know, if you need to get you some water or some wine, whatever, do what you gotta do. We'll be right here, but we're gonna keep it moving. And the next person that I have the privilege of introducing you to is someone whose work I've been following for ages now, and who is currently really throwing down. Anybody heard of this really random, probably not well-known person named Stacey Abrams? Has anybody heard that name before? It's okay if you haven't. You know, she's just arguably one of the most visible Black women in electoral work. Some of y'all might know that she made a bid for governor, and that after that bid started fighting even harder. She had already been fighting to stop voter suppression in the state of Georgia, but then like even expanded that work and started an organization called Fair Fight. Anybody heard of Fair Fight? Anybody following the work of Fair Fight? Yeah, me too. I definitely have an organizational crush on Fair Fight. Well, let me tell you, just a few weeks ago, I got to meet one of the people that is really like at the forefront of that work. Her name is Hillary Holly. She is a badass revolutionary freedom fighter that is working on the front lines of electoral justice to make sure our people are taken care of and get free by building independent political power. So now I'm going to toss it over to Hillary to talk about the crisis of voter suppression and the opportunity for electoral justice. Hillary, I'll toss it to you.
Thank you so much. And I'm really sorry, y'all, that you cannot see me. I'm having technological issues, but first, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. This call has been absolutely wonderful and moving. As Tiffany Roberts mentioned, what I'm taking from this call is so much of this pain and so much of these issues that we can see. Electoral politics can help make that movement. However, I'm a firm believer that the movement leads us and electoral justice follows it. And so for me, how I approach my work is making sure that the people who will represent us and will fight with us, fight against the systems that harm us on the daily, that kills us, to make sure that they can be elected and that they actually have a chance of being elected. And so to kind of walk through how we got here. So I worked on the Abrams for Governor campaign in 2018. And the reason why I got involved is, fun fact, when they reached out and asked me to help launch the campaign, I originally said no, because at that time I did not believe that electoral politics would save us. And I also, in coming from Georgia, I've been born and raised here, the Democratic, and I know this is nonpartisan, I'm just giving background, so I'm not talking about that, but there was a strategy here in place in Georgia that ignored Black and Brown communities and did not really appreciate our votes. And, you know, I knew that Stacey had worked very hard on criminal justice reform and was a huge fan, but I was concerned that if she were to try to implement that same failed racist strategy, especially as a Black woman, that we would essentially be wasting our time, and it would honestly be disrespectful to the voters here in Georgia. But they were like, Hillary, calm down. We're about to smash that whole strategy and try something new and actually invest in the voters who have been, you know, with us this whole time, but they've just been ignored. And so we were one of the first campaigns in the state of Georgia to really do authentic outreach, not just in the metro Atlanta area, but in the rural areas where the healthcare infrastructure is non-existent. As we've seen with COVID-19, everyone was talking about Southwest Georgia nationally, worldwide, about how many Black people were dying down there. And it was not a shock and it was not a surprise, because the elected officials down there have just not represented them, and they have not had representation for years. So we made sure to organize and throughout the entire state, and the movement, the enthusiasm was incredibly high. When we saw the enthusiasm continuing to build, and build, we also started seeing horrible voter suppression happening. And it wasn't just out of the blue. It was something that our now quote unquote governor had been working on as his, when he was Secretary of State of Georgia. And so we saw poll closures happening. We had 214 poll closures alone in the state of Georgia from 2014 until 2018. That is horrible. And it were most of them were in Black and Brown communities that left some people having to travel 20 to 30 miles to vote in person. We also would see absentee ballots being rejected left and right for signature match issues, many of which were Asian American communities and Latinx communities specifically. And so with all that, with everything that was happening, we were able to mitigate a lot of it because we had, for the first time, we had created a fully funded voter protection system where we created a hotline, and voters that had any issue could call us. It doesn't matter who you were voting for, but if you had an issue voting, you could call us and we would help you through it. This mitigated so many of the problems. However, because the system was just designed to suppress the votes, Brian Kemp ended up becoming governor. However, because of the hotline that we had, we were able to document all the stories that people shared with us. I could not vote because I could not afford gas money to drive 30 miles to my polling location. So therefore I did not vote. Or I tried to vote, but they said that my name did not match because I have a hyphen over my name because I don't have a quote unquote like Anglo-Saxon name. So therefore they would reject it, thinking that I was trying to commit voter fraud. We were able to collect so many stories and turn them into sworn statements through affidavits. And as you all may know, when Stacey gave her what I like to call non-concession speech, she not only said that I acknowledge the results, but I'm not going away because basically I'm gonna change the whole system. So we filed a federal lawsuit, which included over 200 stories from voters. And a lot of these stories, like I said, it dealt with polling location, absentee ballot issues, data issues within like the voter registration database, how the machines are allocated, because we had some precincts where it's majority Black and Brown folks voting, and there are like 2 to 3 machines, but then you go down the street and it's a bunch of white people voting and they have 17 machines. It does not make sense, and that allocation we know is not fair. And so with that federal lawsuit, that was the first big move that our organization made, which was very new at the time. However, we knew that litigation could take a while. Litigation is not the only path forward for advocating. And so what we were able to do is because the Abrams for Governor campaign was a movement that we knew that we could just not go. Stacey could not just go and say, all right, I quote unquote lost. That's just not ingrained in her. That's not ingrained in us. And so what we did and with her and our CEO, Lauren Growargo, and myself, is we were like, how do we take the movement that we created, train everybody on how to advocate for election reform and get them to advocate in their counties and then advocate in the state legislature. So what we do is we fight bad bills like anti-voting rights bills. And then we also advocate on the county level to make sure that the counties are doing right by all the voters in those counties. And however, what we also do is, because when we know the right to vote is not granted, all other issues are on the table. So like what Tiffany said, because now Brian Kemp is our governor, the first thing he did was come after reproductive justice. So because of how we operate, we did not stand on the sidelines. So we leveraged our resources and also gave a lot of our resources to the reproductive justice groups here in Georgia to fight that. Tiffany mentioned I like to call the anti-criminal justice reform bill that Brian Kemp has right now. We are working to defeat that bill as well, in addition to all the advocating that we have here in the state. And so what a lot of you on this call probably know us for, though, is our Fair Fight 2020 program, which is essentially, we went to 18 different states and we set up voter protection operations in each one of these states. Because like I said earlier, we were the only, Georgia was the only state to have a fully funded voter protection team in the country. And we knew going into 2020 that could simply not be the case, because we know the current administration that we have could possibly do anything to remain in power. And so we're working in 18 states to set up fully funded voter protection systems so they can also help voters and make sure that the election systems are working for all voters. And so that was launched early last year with the intention to help voters. However, then COVID happened and we started seeing, poll workers who a lot of times are older in age felt that they could not work at the polls, which is understandable. So there was poll workers were quitting. A lot of polling locations were saying that, they can't have people inside. So then we saw, precincts closing down. We saw elections being postponed. And so our work shifted a lot to help, because we know that vote by mail has to happen, period. We don't think it should be the only option, because a lot of folks have to vote in person for issues with like ability differences, translations. A lot of folks on native lands vote in person because the PO box systems. So we still have to have voting in person, but we must advocate for vote by mail. And so what we're doing is we are working with many organizations nationally and then organizations on the ground to make sure that all the states are equipped to have a fully functioned vote by mail operation and election in place. And so what we're doing is basically looking at the laws and looking to see, okay, what needs to happen in all these states to ensure that vote by mail can happen. And that is in addition to the congressional advocating as well, because what's happening with a lot of these stimulus packages is there's starting to be emergency funds allocated for elections. And so right now we want, I believe the current ask is around $3 billion of emergency funds for elections. Right now we have a good 400 million set aside. However, there's still a lot of time to get the additional billions in funding. And then when that funding is guaranteed, advocating on the state level that the states are actually using the money for what they're supposed to be doing, which is making sure that if people want to vote by mail and be safe while voting, that they can, or also making sure that the polling locations and the poll workers have the sanitation needs that's required to make sure that they themselves are safe and the voters are safe while voting in person. And so I know I see a lot of the comments about the USPS issue. And I want to talk a little bit about what we are hearing from the Trump administration and other right-wing organizations. I want to be very clear. Vote by mail has been happening for years. And a lot of the people who have been using vote by mail, and actually the people who love vote by mail the most, are older white folks who tend to vote Republican. So this is not new. However, we know that that the current administration is devastated because if they know they do not have the organizing capacity to basically teach people how to vote by mail who have not voted by mail in the past. And so what you are seeing happening is we are going, and brace with me, y'all, we are going to see a lot of rhetoric coming, talking about voter fraud, talking about not funding the USPS, talking about, people are going to be submitting all these ballots that, shouldn't be voting, dead people voting, etc. That is a fear tactic, first and foremost. They are trying to scare you, and they are trying, but the concern is real. So I don't want to invalidate the concerns here, but this is a whole strategy of what they are doing. And so Donald Trump is starting it from the very top, and it's coming down to local governments. And so what we are doing through the advocating, there's also a lot of litigation happening. So I don't know if you all have been watching, but there are lawsuits being dropped, I think almost every day in all these very specific states to get remedies needed for November. And the USPS has said very vocally that they will do anything they can to support the elections, which includes making sure that any ballots, whether they have stamps or not, are mailed to the county election offices. So the USPS believes in democracy. I want everyone to know that. But the concern is there. And so with one thing that I do want to hit on is the fear. Voter fraud is going to be one of the most pivotal messages that you will see from the right. We are seeing what these are called voter fraud task force popping up around the country. The first one was here in Georgia. So what the Georgia Secretary of State is doing is in coordination with the Trump re-elect campaign. So a state official is working with a Trump re-elect campaign to put together a voter fraud task force, which has 12 members, and 9 of them are prosecutors. Only 2 of them work in election offices. I want to say, and only 2 of them are Black, the rest are white. And we're not just seeing this in Georgia. We're seeing it in West Virginia. New Hampshire's doing something similar with a so-called committee. And then I saw that Kentucky was threatening to launch one. So I don't know where that is, because there's a new governor there. So we could see like that might be handled, but we could see several of these happening. And so what we are doing is we are working with people here in Georgia to find a way to ensure that we empower voters to feel safe to cast a ballot, whether it is they walk to their mailbox and put an absentee ballot in their mailbox, they walk to a drop box and put the absentee ballot in a drop box, or they show up in person, that if you are approached by law enforcement, and I say law enforcement very loosely, y'all, because we know that law enforcement operates in many different ways. I'm talking ICE, GBI, so the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, neighborhood watches, militias. We're thinking very broad on this finding a way to empower these voters and make sure that we know that they know we have their back, in addition to the litigation, in addition to the advocacy, in addition to the organizing work. And so stay tuned on that. I can't say too much, but it's coming. We have a plan on how to combat this. But what I want you all to take away from this is I want you to know that the concern is real. And there is a lot on the line in this election. And I'm not just talking about the top, because we all know that the real injustices that happen to us always starts from the local level. You know, as Tiffany saw, we have DAs, we have sheriffs, we have commissioners, etc., who need to be elected to work with us. And so I get there's a lot on the line, but we have to always operate from a position of power. We cannot operate from a position of fear. And so how you can get involved is you can go to fairfight2020.org, and I can drop it in the chat, and you can sign up where you will hear from the local voter protection director on the ground in your state. If you're in Georgia, you'll be hearing from me a lot. I like to talk to y'all a lot.
You said that about each one. I know.
And so go to fairfight2020.org to get involved. And then also what you can do starting tonight is you can call your US Senator and demand emergency funds for elections with the COVID-19 stimulus packages. Especially if you have senators who are not very friendly to voting rights, or senators who feel like they might be losing their seat because they know that the momentum might not be with them. So call your US Senator, make sure they know that emergency funds for elections need to be included in the next stimulus package. And then you can sign up at fairfight2020.org. Thank you so much, Ashley, for having me. I really appreciate this. You all on this call is amazing. It's given me life. So just, we got this. We got this, y'all. And I believe in the power of us. So thank you so much, Ashley.
Thank you so much, Hillary, for making time. Yo, you heard the call to action. Sign up at fairfight2020.org and call your senator, like all of them, friendly or not, and demand that they include emergency funds for election support in the next stimulus package. This fight for the next stimulus package is going to be important, both to make sure that we get these emergency funds for election protections, also so we make sure that we're demanding infrastructural support, right? In this moment, a divestment from law enforcement, a divestment from just putting stimulus into supporting all of these multinational corporations, but actually supporting our workers, supporting infrastructure in our communities. This is the opportunity for those of us that have been doing that invest divest work to make a demand that our tax dollars be spent on the shit that actually supports our communities. And that's definitely this election protection work. So shout out to Fair Fight. I know we had some comrades from New Georgia Project on here. Shout out to y'all. I saw some of the Movement for Black Lives Electoral Justice folks on the call. Thank you all for also joining. We're in the fight for electoral justice. Anybody out here want some independent political power? It's a me. All right, let's get to work. We have a couple of more before we call it a night, y'all. And I know that many of you who are my friends in real life and my friends on social media know that I have been going off on white people lately. Have you seen me go off on white people on Facebook lately? Yeah, a little bit. And I don't apologize for it. But what I do is make sure that for all of you all who are white people who said, we don't know what to do, man, like we trying out here. It's a hard knock life for us, whatever. I found one of the smartest white women I know to give you your directive. So to talk about the crisis of white nationalism and the rise of the militarized white right, I'm gonna say it one more time just in case you missed it. The rise of white nationalism and the militarized white right, and then the opportunity of anti-racist organizing. I'm gonna toss it to my sister, one of my best friends, Evelyn Lynn, from Showing Up for Racial Justice.
Hey y'all, thanks Ash. So my name is Evelyn Lynn. And
Evelyn, I messed up. Can I do one thing?
yeah, please.
Do one thing. So before we move, I want to give it up one time to Cynthia, our ASL interpreter, who's been holding it down for like over 2 hours, like she's a beast, almost 2 hours. She's amazing. I also want to announce that one of the most incredible ASL interpreters I've ever had the honor to work with, Billy Sanders, one of the flyest interpreters that I also know, is on the line. So Cynthia is gonna keep interpreting, but just so she has a little bit of a breather, because she's been holding it down. Some country fast talking Southerners and homies, she might need a little bit of a break. So if you need ASL interpretation, know that Billy Sanders is also on the line, and you can just scroll through, and his name is Billy Sanders -interpreter. You can also be looking out for him there. So shout out to Cynthia, shout out to Billy, shout out to our Spanish to English interpreters who are holding down the line. Y'all some rock stars. We're gonna make sure that we resource you and your work for staying on longer than we expected. We appreciate you. And with that, I will now officially turn it over to you, Evelyn.
Yeah, and just echoing the gratitude all around. So hey y'all, my name is Evelyn Lynn, and I am the Southern Director for Showing Up for Racial Justice. And my primary role here is to direct the Southern Crossroads Organizing Project. So I am from like conservative country ass folks in a small town in Western North Carolina. Like that's my people. And now I live just outside of Atlanta. I wanna open up with a quote from Linda Burnham from a piece that she wrote before Trump was elected, actually before he won the nomination in 2016. Her piece is called Notes on the Election. And in it, she says, Trump's appeal to working class white folks has driven the issue of organizing them to the top of the agenda where it needs to remain. The power of the right cannot be undercut unless a large segment of its base is broken off. Obviously, this is a long-term proposition, but whatever tactical moves we and others make in this electoral cycle, we need to retain this lesson into the indefinite future. White rage is lethal to democracy and progress, and if we're not organizing white folks around their suffering, we can be sure someone else is. So Southern Crossroads and Surge are intentionally organizing poor and working class white people around our suffering and need. And I want to say explicitly that the reason we're doing this is not because poor white people are any more racist than rich white folks, but because we have more to gain from a transformed economic system and from toppling white supremacy. So rich white folks will never be with us, but if we do the work, poor white folks will be. And this crisis is exposing everything that was wrong before COVID, and it's a huge opportunity to organize. And so just trying to engage folks because it's late in the call, but if you have ideas about what poor white folks have to gain in working in our mutual interests to transform these systems, I would love for you to throw them in the chat. So we know that forces on the far right, and in particular white nationalists, have been emboldened by Trump's campaign, election, and policies. There's a lot of evidence that they are successfully using this moment to recruit and to encourage their followers to target folks of color and Jewish folks with violence. There are articles online that document all this, but I don't want to spend my 7 minutes talking about what they're doing. I want to talk about what we're doing and what we can do. So at Surge, we think about our work inside of two organizing strategies. The first is to create a political home for and to develop the strategic skills of people who already identify as anti-racist. The second strategy is to build new bases of people by engaging folks who are impacted by issues and therefore have the most to gain from joining our movement, but who are not yet engaged on our side. This is what we're up to in Southern Crossroads. So inside of Southern Crossroads, which is very specifically about low-income folks in rural counties and small towns in the South, we are working to out-organize the right by building and supporting transformative organizing projects that build bases of poor and working class folks in majority white rural counties. So that means we knock on doors. Right now, it's more phone calls. We run campaigns to win policies that have meaningful impact on people's lives, do leadership development, political education, all the things. And just to be clear, like the projects are multiracial, but they're with significant numbers of poor white folks, right? Like that's who our folks are. And then the other piece that we're really amping up in this time is to use culture, narrative, and storytelling to speak to the sufferings, longings, and hopes of our people, to inoculate them to messaging from the right and to win their hearts and minds in the service of a more compelling vision. So we have organizing projects or plan to launch them in Middle Tennessee, in Western North Carolina, and in Southwest Georgia. If you live in like anywhere near any of these places and you want to get connected, we're going to put a link in the chat where you can sign up to get connected to us. Also, if you want to launch an organizing project or get support for something that you're already moving with poor and working class folks in your town, email me. And my email is evelyn@fight4thesouth.org. So evelyn@fightforthesouth.org. If you have research skills, if you can make memes, video production skills, communication, storytelling skills, or if you want to volunteer in any other way, just sign up or reach out to me directly. And we have a website that should be live next week, which will also be www.fightforthesouth.org. But we do have Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, which I think are all live. Thank you, Beth Howard, who is on this call right now, who got that stuff set up. I also wanted to share what the Surge Chapter Network is up to. So the Surge Chapter Network has around 130 chapters across the country, and I think around 30 of those are in the South. And they've been organizing folks around decarceration, around ICE detention, mutual aid, and fundraising. They've got hundreds of volunteers who are making calls across the country to get folks plugged into direct actions in their communities in this moment, and also to talk to voters to defeat Trump in November. So if you're interested in plugging into any of that work, we're also going to put the links in the chat so you can sign up there. And then just the other easiest thing that you can do is just to go to Showing Up for Racial Justice's website. You can get on the email list, you can start a chapter, you can find a chapter, it's all right there on the homepage. So the last thing that I want to say is just that in the recent past, and for far too long, in my humble opinion, the focus of anti-racist white folks has been about self-study and workshops. These are important, but they are wholly inadequate if we are serious about toppling white supremacy. So we have to bring new people into our movement. We have to engage them in campaigns and actions that transform power if we have any shot of winning. So I just want to say we need to be bold and take significant risks, know that we will make mistakes, but we have to keep moving. So just much gratitude and thanks for everyone organizing and moving in this moment, and Ash and everyone on the call for bringing it together. And that's what I got.
Give it up one time for Evelyn Lynn. Fight for the South might be the most lit organizational name in the game right now. Like if anybody gets an award for the realest, truest ass name, it's Fight for the South. And what's also real is that is a name in which we can hold them accountable. What they said they were doing is fighting for the South, y'all. So if we see them out in these streets and it don't look like they fighting for the South, guess what? We got questions, right? But if you are a white person that lives in this region that is about that life and wants to give white supremacy that smoke, Evelyn Lynn, Beth Howard, that whole crew is really the ones you want to be rocking with. They gave you a call to action. The website's about to go live. What is real is it is your turn to put in some skin in the game, in more than just a self-reflective kind of way. Thank you so much for that word, Evelyn. We appreciate you. Shout out to the folks that are standing up and showing up for racial justice. We appreciate you. And last but certainly not least on this docket of like some of the most rad, most trusted, most like got skin in the game. So they've been accountable, and we know that when they tell us to do something, it's an informed call to action. The next person I'm going to throw it to, you might be surprised, like might not actually be calling in from the South, but actually got deep roots in our region. It has a history of accountability to our people. Is also one of the smartest strategists that I know that has been talking about what it looks like to adapt our strategies and to build power in times of crisis, particularly like the ones that we are in right now. So somebody that I've been fangirling and following work for a very long time. I'm going to toss it to my friend, my colleague, my comrade, Jairus Dixon to bring us home.
Hey, y'all. First and foremost, I am so grateful for the time you've spent on this call and whatever you had to do to get here. And I'm going to start with breaking the rules because I'm a rule breaker, which means I'm going to ask you to unmute. And if there's 2 lines I want you to know about what it means to build strategy in this moment, it's just 2 things. So the first thing I want you to say is, we have everything we need.
We have everything we need.
Yes.
We need. All our medicine right here. Yeah.
Everything you need.
We have everything.
All right.
we
Now,
need.
the
Everything
second
we
thing
need.
is, if we use all our power.
If we use all our power.
Use all our power.
And there's a delay, so we're doing our best. But again, we have everything we
I'm not
need.
talking to you.
We have everything we need.
Everything we need.
Everything we need.
We have
Everything we
Use all our
Power.
Use all our power.
All our power.
all our power.
Yes.
Use all our power. Everything we need if we use all our power.
I love it. I'll just let it kind of work out. So
Wave upon wave.
And I'm gonna ask y'all to mute now, only because I do want you to hear what I have to say. So thank you. I'm not from the South. I grew up in California. I'm coming to you from Brooklyn, but my mom's from New Orleans, my dad's from Baton Rouge, and most of my family is Louisiana people. And I'm grateful to be here for a bunch of reasons, but I'll tell you how I got to this point. I've been organizing since about 1999, and right now I'm the executive director of Vision Change Wing Consulting, and I'm a bit of a strategist, facilitator, and confidant of many, many movements. So often when I put out a strategy piece or when I put out information on strategy, it's a collection of what I hear from a lot of leaders across a lot of organizations. When Trump was elected, everybody was saying this word fascism, they were saying authoritarianism, and I started to read about it. I started to read about it because I didn't quite know what people meant and what it meant for these times. And I did a lot of reading. I'm not a scholar, but one of the things that I knew, and I think we all know, is that fascist, authoritarian, one, there's a global movement happening, right? So it's not just about Trump, but 2, they utilize emergencies to accelerate their power. So the issue is that we were expecting an emergency, right? And there's an and you can look at whether you're talking about Mussolini, whether you're talking about Hitler, you can look at all kinds of different authoritarian governments, and there's a moment where they say, this emergency happened, and that's why we are going to suspend civil liberties, disrupt elections. It's this oppressed group's fault, and we're going to criminalize dissent and do all these things, right? And we're in that moment right now. And we don't need to unpack all the pieces of like what's happening, but for all of y'all who play sports, and I am a former athlete, one of the best things your opponents can do is hand you their playbook. And we have it. History tells us that they're going to use the emergency to scapegoat people and to create such a level of fear so that we don't fight back. And so the goal is that we continue to fight back. And so here's my assessment of where we're at. We have everything we need. We have enough people who are on our side. We have the resources, right? But we haven't built the power. We spend too much time fighting each other. We spend too much time arguing with each other. And we need to spend more time engaging our base. So just as the right has opportunities in this time, so does the left. There's usually a point in any base building process, and any point when you are engaging with folks, where sometimes people say, well, I don't know if I can get involved because I have to do X, Y, Z. I don't really think things are that bad. What happens in an emergency is that the systemic failures are clear. The systemic failures are clear, which means you can actually have a rapid expansion of base and a deepening of the leadership of people in our movements. So I want y'all to raise your hand if you know somebody who agrees with you, but is not actually very politically involved right now. Like if you know at least one person. Great. So that's your assignment for the next week. How are you going to deepen that person's participation in our movement? Because we're going to need all of us to build the power that we need. And we're going to need all of us to deepen our work. There's a piece around revolutions require discipline, and they require sustained discipline. But discipline requires resilience. So there's this piece around, we're past either or time. Sometimes we spend time saying, the priority is healing. No, the priority is strategy. The priority is mutual aid. No, the priority is electoral work. There's not one priority. The priority is both and. The priority is more action, and the priority is coordination, right? The priority is alignment. The priority is getting really, really clear about what we are for. In our movement, sometimes we're really good at saying what we're against. But we need to get clear, not just like we believe like we're anti-capitalist, but no, we do, what type of government system, like most of us are pretty dissatisfied with this government. So what does liberatory governance mean? And how are we going to build it together? And I think there's also this piece around the coordination of short-term strategy and long-term strategy. Sometimes we're like, we want to fight for this thing that's going to happen years and years and years from now. And I believe in that. I've spent a lot of time fighting for transformative justice, a lot of work that takes centuries to build. I got to be alive to get there. So we have to coordinate short-term strategy and long-term strategy. And the short-term wins that are going to defeat the right will mean some level of alliances with people we may not feel great about forever, but we're going to have to explore and think about temporary short-term alliances to build power and then move towards a liberatory vision. Often under fascist and authoritarian times, there's an alluring vision that happens to the right around whose fault it is, who did it to you. And it's the kind of vision that allows people to keep fighting for something, or at least keeps them afraid. Our vision needs to be even more powerful. But I want to recognize that I don't want to take up too much time. But the most important thing I want to say is that what this moment requires is complexity. And it requires us to be able to be in that. So over the last 3 years, my team has done so much mediation in our movements. We have done so much work trying to support people to get along either within their organizations, within their formations. And sometimes it's ideological, but more often it's ego. We're going to have to do the work to take care of what we need inside of our own spirits, to recognize that, like, my profile rising, your profile rising, any one individual person's profile rising, it does not make a movement, right? So if I were to offer you a couple of things first, how are you going to deepen your commitment? And by deepening your commitment, I'm not asking you to be unsustainable. I'm asking you to find the sustainability you need, find the strategies that hold you up to push a little longer and to push a little harder. And how are you going to build a broader movement? There are more of us than them. There are more of us than them. Don't ever forget that. But if we are isolated, if we are picking each other off, if we are doing the rights work for them, then we are just paving the way. So the idea is to think exactly like how folks are saying, think like the victory is right in front of us. How do you want to act with the victory right in front of you? How do you want to treat each other? How do you want to take care of each other? And I'm just grateful to be in community with you all. I texted my aunties and I'm grateful to be here. We're going to need each other more than ever. And I'm excited to build alongside you. So last time, unmute, because I like a ritual. We have everything we need
We have
We have
everything
everything we
everything we
need.
need.
Everything we need.
Everything
Everything we need.
All our power.
Use all our
All
power.
our power,
We have
all our
everything we
wisdom
need.
right here.
Our power.
We
All
have
our
everything
power.
we need.
All our power.
All our power.
Our
Our
power.
power.
Use all of
Everything
everything.
we need.
All our power.
It could all
Yes.
Yes. All right. If y'all go on mute for me, that would be delicious. We want to give it up one time for the amazing, for the brilliant, for the like holding us accountable to our greatness. Edith Woodson, on the line. Just want to like give you gratitude, comrade, for joining us and for being here and for that movement lesson that we needed. So now you've heard from by no means all of the most brilliant people that I know, but from a handful of them. And in that amount of time, you know, a couple of hours feels long, but what's real is there's so many voices that you didn't hear from. Some of our comrades that are holding down what it means to be fighting at the nexus of climate justice in the moment of crisis in regards to COVID-19, right? Who you didn't hear from was folks that are fighting, and don't get me wrong, a lot of people on this call do a whole lot of different kinds of work. What they told you about most times was what their W-2 is, or what they spend their 9 to 9s doing, right? But you didn't necessarily hear specifically from folks in the reproductive justice movement or gender justice movement. You didn't necessarily hear from folks that are leading the disability justice movement, which quite frankly, and some of us were chatting about this in the chat, have a lot to teach those of us that at least appear able-bodied on this call about how to survive this moment of COVID-19 crisis, right? There's so many other front lines of struggle, all converging in our region, right? So this won't be the last call, y'all. But even just on this call, you've been given some really concrete next steps that you can take. If you pick one, even one of the concrete next steps that these people just offered to you, imagine what impossible things would become possible because you took a risk to do something, right? So I want to just give you a few next steps from Highlander, knowing damn well that there's a million more for the few that we're going to share, on top of what's already been shared from our comrades. I want you to know that in this moment, there is no such thing as neutrality. I'm going to say it one more time. There is no such thing as neutrality. You are either bending the moral arc of the universe toward justice or you aren't. You are either practicing what you preach about Black Lives Mattering, or you're supporting and complicit in the efforts to support and be complicit in Black genocide. You are either fighting for workers or you're not. You are either building the beloved community or you aren't. You are either doing popular education and mutual aid or you aren't. There is no neutral, right? There is no neutral. And all of us are accountable, right? To not pretending like it is and giving people passes as they are, right? So there is no neutrality. We need to bust the myth bubble. The second, and Vahisha spoke to this, is we need to care for ourselves. We need to do our homework at home, right? And we need to care for each other. That's our collective work, right? So you need to care for yourself, because if yourself is not well, you will bring your trauma and bleed all over us in movement, right? We need you to take care of your homework at home, care for yourself, and then in community, care for each other. And sometimes care looks like holding each other accountable, right? People that I love, when they care for me, are telling me like, Ash, you need to do this. You know you do, right? So care for yourself, care for each other, bust the myth of neutrality. Investigate. If you don't think you know enough, then learn some more. But don't let your not knowing everything keep you from doing something. Make informed decisions, but don't let perfection, which is a characteristic of white supremacy, keep you from excellency, right? Get active. Join something. You as an individual are a badass, and I'm excited to build with you and to get to know you and to build community with you. But you cannot, I don't believe you. I mean, I just saw when they asked to raise your hand, if you had somebody that you could move, you raised your hand. Like a Jairus tricked you, right? So your job is, if there isn't one of these organizations in your general vicinity, to start something, to pull 3 or 4 of your friends together, 2 or 3 of your friends together and make it happen. Lives literally depend on it. If you can't do none of that, but you got 50 cents to rub together, you can donate that to one of these organizations that are committed to doing something, right? That's another way to show that you aren't neutral, is to put your money where your politics are, right? You can call your elected officials. We heard multiple opportunities to call and make demands of your mayors, to call and make demands of your senators. We know that the Health Over Profit campaign that Highlander and Black Voters Matter and Southern Black Rural Women's Initiative and the Southern Movement Assembly and others have been putting together has been demanding that governors not prematurely reopen our states, to put our wellness over profit, and to quit making these false dichotomies between there being one road that's good for the economy and one road that is good for our health. Neither, it's a false dichotomy. If you haven't signed the petition, sign the petition. Call your governor, right? There's so many elected officials that you can be calling, or you could become one, right? But there's so many paths to electoral justice that actually make the road that we're fighting to build much easier to build if we actually are politically engaged. And then last but certainly not least, on the next steps that you can take, I got this from some of the, I call them the white beards, some of the old heads in Jackson, Mississippi. I know we got some comrades from Jackson on the call tonight. And I learned it while I was, in my free time campaigning for a guy named Chokwe Lumumba. Some of y'all might know him. He was one of my heroes. And while we were on the campaign trail, there was this chant that came from a hip hop song called "What We Gonna Do to Make the Black Nation Rise," I think is what it was called. And I see the hip hop heads like, yeah, I know that song. It's dope. You should YouTube it. But they remixed it for the sake of the campaign. And they would say, what are we gonna do to make Jackson rise? And people would say, educate, motivate, organize, right? And so some of us, I see you, Jafrica, in the chat, I see you. So some of us like remixed it because we were like, there's a time and a place for motivation, but some of us believe that some of these people need to be agitated. And not just the people that are causing all the harm, but sometimes movement people too, right? We need to agitate them, right? Like without the agitator in your washing machine, your clothes don't get clean, right? So we said, what we gonna do to make the people rise? We gonna educate, agitate, organize, right? You can pick which middle word you wanna use based on where you're at and what work you're doing. But that's your concrete. If you forget what you're supposed to be doing at any given moment, from here on out until the next time that we are blessed enough to gather, then you remember that what Ashley told you to do was educate, motivate, agitate, and organize. And you can't organize without building power, right? There's no such thing. Organizing is literally the art and science of building power, right? If you don't understand it, that's really the most simplified way I can give it to you. Organizing is the art and science of building people power, right? So what are you gonna do to make the people rise? I want you to just educate, motivate, agitate, and organize. 4 things, 4 things. So in our closing, I have a question that it is not rhetorical. I literally want you to answer it. I want you to either drop your answer in the chat or I want you to email your answer to me. My assistant is about to lose her mind, but I really do. It's not a rhetorical question. I want you to either put it in the chat or I want you to email me. I know, Paige, I'm sorry. But I really do, because I want to hold each other accountable to the amazing education that we just got on this call. And I assumed, and I asked you when I got on this call, if you were on a call because you wanted to learn and do something with that knowledge, and you said yes, right? So I want to ask you this question, and I want you to answer it. What would you do, even if you were scared, even if you knew it would be imperfect, even if you know you might fail, even if you knew you didn't know everything, what would you do if you weren't scared and you knew you couldn't fail, to fight and win our people's ability to not only survive, but to thrive? I'm gonna say it again. What would you do if you weren't scared and you knew you couldn't fail, to fight and to win our people's ability not only to survive, but to thrive? What is your utopian vision? One more time. What would you do? You on this call right now, the over 100 of you between like almost 200 really of you between Facebook and Zoom. What would you do if you weren't scared and you knew you couldn't fail, to fight and win our people's ability, not just to survive, but to thrive? What would you do? I see folks saying that they would run for political offices, that they would spread wealth, that they would buy storefronts and do mutual aid distribution, that they would quell voter suppression, because we need to make sure that we're working with our folks, that we would gather deep souls to make change and to push against the racist environment of the communities that they live in. What else would we do? What else would we do? We'd run for office. Organize your white nephews and nieces to understand and undo their racism. Yes. Close down these meatpacking plants. Organize our neighborhoods, knock every door. Reunite children with their parents. Show up every single day ready to agitate the mayor's office and the police department. We would abolish prisons. We would work to stop voter suppression. We would win campaign finance reform. We would support building strong systems of food sovereignty, right? What else would you do? Start a rural workers center, right? We would make sure that like indigenous people's national sovereignty was acknowledged and respected, right? We would make sure that we did what we had to do to make sure that climate change was something that was a distant memory, right? We would fight for our workers. We would fight against anti-Asian sentiments in this country. We would demolish anti-Black racism and white supremacy and white nationalism, right? Many of us believe that like we would create a world where there's no capitalism, right? We would build a world where everybody has what they need, so there is no harm, so there needs to be no law enforcement in the first place, right? We would change policies, we would feed people, healthcare for everybody, abolish borders, right? They wouldn't exist, right? Everybody would have access to public education. Intersex folks' rights would be respected from birth. Yes. Keep them coming. In closing, what I want you to know is that all of that is possible if you start somewhere by doing something. So I want you to think about the faithful next step that you can take toward the vision that you just shared. What is the most faithful next step that you can take toward the vision that you shared? Because what's real is we can move even while we're scared, right? When my ancestors and elders said, we are not afraid, we are not afraid, we are not afraid today, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. They weren't saying it because they weren't scared. They were dispelling it so that they could move, right? By all the means, any of the means necessary to do so. So I desperately implore you to my gut, to my heart place. I beg you to do something, to envision what you just shared in real time out in the world and off this Zoom call. Make it so, good people. Let's get to work. Thank you all so much for joining the State of Emergency call. I hope your analysis is stronger, and I hope you are even more committed to the action of doing something to make the world a better place, to make our people more safe, and so that our folks can thrive. As we close, I encourage you to come off mute and send your blessings of love and solidarity messages to each other as we close. Thank y'all. Good night.
Thank you so much.
Blessings.
Thanks,
Bye.
Ashley.
Family.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, everybody.
Inspired.
This
And
alone.
You all
said,
inspire
yes,
me.
yes, 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 yes.
You all
Blessings.
inspire me.
Be protected. Much
We
love.
See
don't
Stay
do
everybody.
this
safe. Stay
alone.
I
grounded.
see
See
you,
you out there.
Pilar.
All important.
Love,
Thank you,
family.
Ash.
Namaste,
Thanks,
beloved.
Anisha. Thanks, Ashley.
Let's get free.
So good.
Cynthia.
So good.
Yes, Bonnet. Come through, Bonnet. Cute little
So
heartbeat,
good.
Bonnet.
Thank you, Ashley.
Peace and blessings.
Thank you. So
Thank
good.
you,
Thank you,
Ashley.
Ashley.
Thank you, Highlander.
Liberation to all.
Yes, we get all our medicine right
Oh,
here.
definitely a shout out to the Highlander. Yes.
Yes.
Peace and blessings.
Thank you.
So good.
All right, we appreciate y'all. I know some of y'all be trying to stay for the after party. There really isn't one.
Always. I just be like slam on the linger.
So I'm about to close it out, but we love y'all. We appreciate y'all. Thanks for all your time.
Thank you.
Thank
We
you,
love
Ashley.
Bye.
y'all.